Here goes a subject matter that I have not spoken about in quite some time, and that is pertaining to the heating systems. Now, I don't want to go into real depth when it comes down to heating system in this particular production, but I do want to talk about what you are reading on the screen right now. And if you're not able to look at your screen, let me read it for you. Biden invokes emergency wartime powers to boost heat pump production with $169 million in funds in administration's latest push to replace gas appliances. I want you to think about that for a second. And we know that the Democratic Party has had a problem with gas appliances, internal combustion engines, cars with internal combustion engines. They have a problem with you using a gas water heater. They have a problem with you having a gas or oil-fired boiler or furnace. They have a problem with you having a gas fired stove. They literally want you to have this replaced with electric, which is the most expensive source of heat that you can use when it comes down to producing heat or cooking food. These are just facts. I don't care what anybody else tells you. But the question that would have to be asked, what is it that the Democrats have? What vested interests do they have in all of this? How much do they truly believe? Is this a part of their core values? Do they truly believe that gas-fired boilers and stoves and water heaters are the real problem when it comes down to climate change? Well, we understand that they are masking this under the guise of saving the planet and climate change. And I'm telling you this much right now, this is the least of your worries. This is why I don't even get caught up into that whole climate change agenda nonsense. But when you ask, what is the question? Do you truly believe? How much do you really believe in what you're saying? See, if I believe in something, I can speak about it in depth. When somebody truly believes in something, it's a part of their core values. They could speak about it in depth. You wouldn't even have to write things down to be able to jot this out right off your memory, because this is a part of your core values. But when you sit back and you have a conversation with these Democrats, with these liberals, and you ask them, and you really pick their brain about how much do you really believe in what you're saying, what you're going to realize is they make absolutely no sense. Their positions stand on no foundation. This is why they're so easily dismantled. They know nothing about nothing, and what they're doing is they're parroting regurgitated talking points that they got from somebody else. Because why? This wasn't an original thought generated out of their own thought process. They're just reciting what they heard somebody else tell them. Likewise, when it comes down to Joe Biden. Now just take a look at this guy. I mean, these images really depict the failure that he truly is. I mean, this is the biggest embarrassment that I've ever seen in my entire life as a president. I mean, here you got a guy who can't hold a coherent sentence, who's a bumbling fucking idiot, falls asleep during important conference meetings with other world leaders, falling off of his bike, falling up the stairs, banging his head in Air Force One, falling off stages, turning around to shake hands with nobody. I mean, this is literally what we have going on with Joe Biden. Either he is this much of an embarrassment or he is that good of a damn actor. But I'm really not going toward the latter of the two, because just yesterday I found out that he turned 81 years old about a day or so ago. Now, this is a man who is on the waning years of his life. We all know, this is factual. This is not a conclusion. This is not where we can take a good guess. No, we know that his better days are behind him. I mean, when you simply look at this guy, you know that's a complete fact. His better days are behind him. So my question would be is, you're trying to implement this Green New Deal nonsense. Everyone get out of your gasoline internal combustion engine car and get into some electric car. Stop using your gas-powered boilers or fire boilers and get this heat pump stuff that we're trying to put in. What would be his vested interest in this? Why would he push this so hard? Because as long as it would take to actually get this done, like I told you, his better days are behind him. Do you think he'll be around to actually see this ever implemented? And this is something else a lot of y'all got to stop to think. And I'm talking about you idiots who actually went out and casted a vote for this guy, thinking that he was going to be a better president. You have to ask the question is, what obligation would he have? Do you remember what I said in the last production that I made pertaining to the termination of Cynthia G's YouTube channel? And I told black men, even when it came down to Kevin Samuel's viral video, average at best back in 2020. Now, a lot of people had a problem with my criticisms of these positions that black men held when it comes down to shaming these women, when it comes down to trying to embarrass them. And listen, when you see that you're shaming somebody, insulting them, and pointing out factual things that you can say, hey, this makes you look ridiculous. This is not just my opinion. These are facts. When you point this out and say, hey, this is what it is, and that person still doesn't back down, they double down. Like I said, when it comes down to Cynthia G, despite the fact that she's a blatant hypocrite on what she speaks on, because she had a child with a guy that, according to what she stated, would fit her same character and narrative. But when people question her or call her out on this, she doesn't back down, she doubles down. What did I say when it came down to this and why you don't debate with her? We can't keep doing this with you. We can't keep shaming you because this doesn't have any effect on you. And I say the same thing when it comes down to Joe Biden. Shaming him doesn't have any effect on him. What is his obligation? He doesn't care that he's the worst president in the history of this country. Why? Because his better days are way, way behind him. So he can care less. Do you think he's going to be around to see all this stuff implemented? If you believe that, I'll sell you a bridge in Brooklyn for a real good price. So what would be his vested interest, and why would somebody think that a guy like this should sit in the White House as the leader of the free country, of the free world, or what they claim to be the free world? It makes no sense. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how badly he tarnishes his reputation and how badly he destroys the country, he's not going to be around to deal with that ridicule. So it means absolutely nothing. This is also another reason why, what I'm pretty much saying to y'all is he has nothing to lose at this point in time. This is also another reason why he does not want to step down, why he does not want to let a younger candidate step in and take his place, and why he will ultimately cause the Democratic Party to lose in 2024's election. This is a fact. We all know this. His numbers are they're terrible. His polling numbers suck. So anytime somebody thinks to go ahead and vote for somebody, this might be one thing that you might want to consider. What do you have to lose if you do a terrible job leading this nation? And when you realize somebody has absolutely nothing to lose because he's on his way out, he already has, do I got to go ahead and say it? Listen, y'all know what I'm talking about. But anyhow, let me just say this. I want y'all to be very careful when it comes down to this new technology that they're trying to give you. They're going to try to incentivize you with this. They're going to push this in your face left and right. They're going to tell you how it's so much better. Now, you were dealing with people who are pushing this agenda. And once again, the question is, why would they push this agenda? Because you don't even believe in what you're talking about, because you know nothing about the subject matter. These are people who have not spent a day's worth of work inside of a boiler plant operating these systems, have had to deal with a heat exchanger, have had to go ahead and replace a radiator valve, have had to install an air conditioner. They know nothing about this. As a matter of fact, when was the last time you seen any of these bastards getting dirty? The same, as clean as their suits and ties are when they come in, and their cufflinks is just as clean as it is by the time they're finished a day's worth of work. As a matter of fact, I believe Joe Biden spends more than half of the year on vacation. God. All right. So why are we listening to these people? What would be your vested interest in seeing everybody go to electric? Because you don't believe in this. You don't know nothing about the subject. What you're merely doing is parroting the same regurgitated talking points you heard from who? Your global elites. Your Democrats are the front runners for your global elites. Joe Biden is a front runner for the global elites. And if you don't believe me, okay, I just hit you with these things right here. The migrant crisis that's taking place. Soon as Joe Biden got into the White House, the migrant crisis started taking place, but it got even that much worse in 2023, this year. But now what I notice is that, the same migrant crisis that we're having here in the U.S., you have other countries all around the world saying that they're having the same crisis. How are these things happening simultaneously? Just like when it comes down to this whole heat pump stuff and people talking about the cost of gas and whatnot, we know the prices of gas skyrocketed the minute this rotting corpse, this turd, took the White House, took the Oval Office. And if it was just a matter of it being Joe Biden, then how is it that we have prices around the world of gas are all over the place? Inflation all over. It's simultaneously these things are happening. Just like with the pandemic. You notice how these things all happen at the same time. Just like when people say, well, Donald Trump was the reason why the pandemic came to the U.S. in the first place. And I said, no, that's not the case. Regardless of whether you like him or not, you're going to have to call this right down the damn middle. Because if Donald Trump was the reason for the pandemic spreading across this nation, then how did it make its way globally, worldwide, all simultaneously at the same time? Explain that. You start to notice that there's a consistent pattern here, that all of these things take place in multiple parts of the planet at the same time. Just like with the vaccine mandates, every country starts pushing the same talking point. Get your vaccine or lose your job. Globally, this is happening simultaneously. Make sense out of that. Do you not see the consistent pattern here? So what you have is your elected officials, which are really unelected, are pushing an agenda that is being created by your global elites. They're not calling the goddamn shots. Joe Biden doesn't know whether he's coming or going. He's too stupid to call any goddamn shots. So we know where he's getting his agendas from. Now, let me just say this much. I want you to be very careful when it comes down to stuff that you're going to hear over the next couple of years. You're going to hear a whole lot of fluff that amounts to absolutely nothing. You're going to hear a whole bunch of stuff that sounds good, but doesn't actually perform as good as it sounds. And if you don't know how to decipher this, I'm going to tell you this much right now. Stick to what works. All right? When it comes down to your car, should I go get an EV? I'm going to tell you this much right now. Unless you don't mind waiting multiple hours to charge that battery, unless you don't mind not having a vehicle because, hey, the battery's down, I don't have the means to charge it, or you got to worry about whether you're going to get stuck somewhere because the battery's going to die out on you, my advice to you would be stick to what you know. The internal combustion engine is still and always will be the most reliable vehicle on the road and the most efficient and effective vehicle on the road. These are facts. I don't give a damn what these people tell you. This is still, to this day, will be the most reliable source of transportation is the internal combustion engine. There are two great inventions that man has come up with. That is the boiler and the internal combustion engine. Those are two probably the best inventions that man has ever come up with. And now what they are attempting to do is demonize these inventions and say that, well, these things are really destroying the planet, which is a bunch of bogus, a bunch of buck. Makes no sense. But they will sell you on this, fearmonger you on this, to get you to believe what they're saying to you. Just like when it comes down to your heating system. Well, I got a gas-fired boiler. Should I keep that, or this new heat pump technology sounds real good? Maybe I need to just scrap the gas boiler or the oil boiler and go ahead and go with one of these. I'm going to tell you this much right now. You do that, you're going to be, the fix is in if you do that. Stick to what you know. Fossil fuel-fired boilers are still and always will be the most reliable source of heat that you can get. It is the most efficient source of heat that you can get. It is a system that can produce the largest amounts of heat for the cheapest price. These are facts. Don't get it twisted on how they inflate the numbers, because some of y'all are gonna say, well, gas is so expensive right now, maybe it makes more sense to go to electric. Well, they raised the prices of gas up for a reason, like I told y'all. Do you ever start to wonder why all around the world gas prices are through the goddamn roof? This is an agenda being pushed. They just raised the price of gas so you can believe that, well, using electric is really more efficient, a lot cheaper. No, that's just how they get you. And if you fold and don't stand firm on your square, guess what? The fix will be in. I told y'all in the video I did about 2 months ago. Let me turn the engine on for heat. I told y'all in the video I did about 2 months ago that the only way they can get their agendas pushed is by getting a mass amount of people on board with their agenda. If they can get you to believe the nonsense and the garbage that they're trying to force feed down your throat, then it becomes home sweet home for them. But if the majority of people say no to this, they can't push the agenda. The agendas that they are pushing are not sustainable. It really is just a cannibalistic agenda. And what it really means is you're not going to have access to resources. As a matter of fact, it was a couple of years ago, I think it was back in 2020 or 2021. I think it was 2021. There was an MCA bus that had a poster on the back of the bus, one of the express buses. And they tell you what the agenda is, and that's the crazy part, because it said, get out of your car and get into this bus. This is what they're telling you. Get out of your car and get into this bus. They're telling you they don't even want you driving on the road. They just want you to ride the bus. They want you to rely on somebody else in order for you to be able to commute to where you want to go. That you don't get to travel on your own time and your own dime anymore. You travel when we tell you that you can travel. And we all know about buses. Buses run on fixed schedules. And after a certain point in time, you can't even catch a bus depending on where you're at. So why would you rely on this as your main source of transportation? It's a nice supplement if you need to, but I don't want it to be my only source. I like my car. But this is the agenda that they're pushing. So that's just one example. They'll give you a bunch of incentives. And they'll tell you things like, well, the heat pumps. And let me just say this much. As far as these are concerned, this is not what I'm most skilled in. You know, I know more about the steam heating systems, but I do know a little bit about these heat pumps, these HVAC units. And pretty much how this works is, instead of it making refrigerant to cool down the inside in the wintertime, it reverses the direction of flow, and the cold comes to the outside unit, which, please forgive me if I don't know the exact name, the evaporator or the condenser or whatever, we're just going to call it a heat pump. But it reverses it, and the cold air comes through here, and the heat goes inside on an air handler unit that you have typically, which sits over a window. Now, what I will say about this is, if you want to have it as a secondary option, hey, I don't have a problem with that. If you want to have it as a main means of being able to cool your home down in the summertime, hey, I don't have a problem with that. As a matter of fact, they work best in the summertime because it's best designed for producing air conditioning. That's what this was designed for. It's not designed for producing heat. They're trying to get it to do something that it was not meant to do. So I will say this much. When it comes down to heat, the best pieces of equipment when it comes down to producing heat are, and always will be, the fossil fuel fired boiler or furnace. And when it comes down to producing air conditioner, will be the HVAC unit. These are just facts. However, if you try to start switching them up and trying to get them to do vice versa, you know, you might be able to get away with some things for a little while, but this don't guarantee how long it's going to last. Anyhow, I don't want to ramble too long. But what they'll tell you about these units is that they're more efficient. Now, don't get caught up with that language, because that can mean any damn thing. As an example, when I was a superintendent, I had I heated up my apartment, a 3-bedroom apartment, with an electric powered boiler. I still own one of these boilers to this day. Not like the one I had back then, but I have an electric powered jewel steamer, and it's made for steaming jewelry with. And if you go ahead and you ask about these boilers, the manufacturer will tell you, well, if you ask them how efficient is the boiler, how effective is it? The boiler is 100% efficient. Now, what does efficient mean? What do they talk about when they say this? Just like when it comes down to let's take a cast iron boiler for a second, and you talk about a hot water boiler compared to a steam boiler. They're going to tell you that the hot water boiler is more efficient. Many people, the one thing I've heard this time and time again throughout my entire life, but no one has actually given an explanation to why the hot water boiler is more efficient. There's nothing that actually states this. It just shows the efficiency rating. All right, I'm going to give you a breakdown. Let's start with the electric boilers. The electric boilers is 100% efficient. Why? What does that mean? That 100% of the energy that you are paying for is being channeled into the application in which it is being used for. So what does that mean? An electric boiler has an electrical heating element inside of it. That's what heats up your water. That's what boils your water into steam. It doesn't mean that this thing is going to be cheaper to use. It doesn't mean it's going to heat your home any better, or whatever your application is. It doesn't mean it's going to be better than gas. What it means is 100% of that electricity, if it's 120 volts and 1500 kilowatts going into heating that water, all of that energy is going into heating that water. There's no heat loss being lost anywhere else. Everything is being channeled directly into bringing that water into a boil. It doesn't mean that this is going to be cheaper to use. If you're using a commercial grade boiler, like what I used to have, which was a sauna room boiler, but I converted it to be able to make for space heating purposes. All of the energy, the 18 kilowatts, the 208 volts that are going into powering this thing, all of that is being channeled into that heating element, into bringing that water into a boil. However, it does not mean that this is more cost effective to use than a gas-fired boiler. So this is part of the stuff that they're going to tell you. And there's a lot of information that's being omitted. And if you have no experience in this field, you're going to get got. Let's shut the engine off. So now let me go ahead and use my example when it comes down to the hot water boiler and the steam boiler. Now we're talking about two of the same exact boiler, cast iron boilers, but the only difference is one is hot water, one is steam. They're both the same boiler. Why is one more efficient than the other? They always say this. They showcase the efficiency rating, but they never tell you why this actually is. And all this really means, just think about the way a hot water boiler is built, or the way a hot water boiler is the application in which it is in. All of the boiler from the bottom to the top, all of the heat exchangers are filled completely to the top with water. Every heat exchanger, they all have heat exchanger pins that pretty much capture the flue gases that trap the heat in a lot longer before it actually exits into the flue pipe. So from top to bottom of each heat exchanger, that water is being heated. That's what they mean when they say that the hot water boiler is more efficient. Some of y'all still might not know what I mean when I say this. Okay, so what do you mean how is it more efficient than the steam? Okay, this is what I'm going to tell you. The steam boiler, the same exact boiler. You have a sight glass that tells you the water level of that boiler. That is usually about a little bit around that, or close to the halfway mark. So you have half of the boiler that's full, but you really are not supposed to go much higher, because then you start to have water surging into your headers and whatnot, and you don't want that. But that's a different subject. So half of that boiler is filled, but you still have the heat exchangers that's still halfway not filled. It's just air inside of it, or steam, or whatever the case may be. So pretty much you have a segment of where water is not being heated, and heat is essentially just going out into the flue pipe, really not being used to reheat anything. And that's all it really means when they say that the hot water boiler is more efficient than the steam boiler. That's all it is. And this is only when it comes down to sectional boilers, cast iron boilers. This is not applicable when it comes down to a Scotch marine boiler. The reason why I say that is because all of the tubes are submerged under the water of the boiler water level. That's just a fact. Now that I've gotten that out the way. So when they tell you that the HVAC, and let's just go ahead and compare the electric boiler to the gas boiler for a second. The electric boiler is more efficient than the gas boiler, but it doesn't mean it can produce more heat or it's cheaper to run than the gas boiler. All it means is that all of the heat that I'm using, as far as electricity is concerned, to power that boiler is going directly into that heating coil to heating up that water. When they say that the gas boiler is not as efficient, that means that, okay, you got your combustion chamber, you got your firebox, and then you have your flue exhaust. That just means that heat is coming out through the exhaust. So instead of that heat being used to reheat, it's just going out into the atmosphere. So that's all they mean when it comes down to, well, this is not as efficient. So there's just more heat loss. However, this is going to be a lot cheaper to run when it comes down to operating your boiler. All right. And it's actually much more cheaper than heating your home up with electrical heat. There's a reason why buildings don't use electrical heat. There's a reason why in most private houses, they have centralized systems. There's a reason why in most buildings, they have centralized systems. And what is a centralized system? Doesn't mean it's forced air. Doesn't mean it's HVAC. It just means that the heat source comes from one source. Whether it be one hot air furnace in the basement, or whether it be a boiler in the basement that heats up the entire building. That's all that means, a central heating system. Now, so they're telling you that, hey, these things are going to be cheap. And I want you to look at, there's something that I want to point out right here. And it just lets me know that they're omitting information or not telling you the truth. And this is what really disturbs me. I'm just going to read this top paragraph. Heat pumps can heat and cool homes and businesses more efficiently using thermal transfer, which moves heat from one area to another rather than generating new heat. Let me just let y'all pause and let that last statement, that last line of that paragraph set in with you. If you believe that, then I got a bridge in Brooklyn I'll sell you for a real good price. And here's something that I've noticed a lot of HVAC guys say. Now, I'm not no specialist when it comes down to HVAC, so don't quote me at it. But what they'll tell you when it comes down to air conditioning systems is that the air conditioner doesn't actually cool the air. What it's really doing is it's taking or removing the hot air out of the room. And that's how it's just dropping the temperature that way. They say something along those lines. And it's so disturbing to me when I hear people say this, because it's just inaccurate. It's simply just not true. And what they're trying to tell you is that you can actually cool a room down without actually having to cool the room down. In order to cool down the temperature of a room, you can remove the hot air, but you have to replenish it with cold air. Otherwise, you have a vacuum if you have nothing to replenish it with. It's just that simple. But they're telling you that these things work pretty much off of removing hot air out of... Okay, it makes no damn sense. It's just ridiculous. Let's just go ahead and unpack that theory for a second. What is the reason why you put on an air conditioner in the summertime? Because if all it took was just to remove the hot air out your home, you wouldn't need an air conditioner. You would just need a window fan. Just put a window fan in and put it on exhaust and just pull the hot air right out. But the problem is when you have a window fan and you're pulling the air right out, you can do that on a nice, comfortable, cool day. Why? Because you have plenty of cool air replenishing the hot air that's inside of the home. So this becomes very effective. You can shut your AC off and give it a break when this actually happens. Why? Because you're just simply moving hot air out and replenishing it with cold air. Why? Because the ambient air temperature outside is cooler than the ambient air temperature inside, which it's very effective up until the temperature decides to go back up again. And when the temperature goes back up, what's the reason why you put an air conditioner on? Because the temperature on the outside is hotter than the inside. So the thing is, if the temperature on the outside is hotter than the inside, if you're just making heat exchange to just move hot air from one area to another and get cool air, well, where are you going to get the cool air from? If the ambient air temperature outside, let's say you got a room of 80 degrees, 79 degrees, you want to drop the temperature down to 70 degrees, 68 degrees. The ambient temperature outside is 95 degrees. So no matter what type of heat exchange that you're using, if you're just simply going off of these temperatures, none of this makes any sense. You're not actually cooling down anything. Why? Because you don't have a cooler temperature to reach the level of a 68 degrees. Everything that you have, whether it be on the inside or outside, exceeds that limit. So you're going to be somewhere in between 95 and 79 degrees. Chances are you're going to be warmer if you decide to just go about it doing it that way. So they tell you that, well, air conditioners don't actually cool the air. That's a bogus, bold-faced statement. It's so disturbing to me when people say this, because it's amazing to me that people will still use asinine statements like this and believe this to be true. Let me tell you a little something about the air conditioner. There's a reason why they call it an air conditioner, not an air cooler. An air cooler would just merely drop the temperature down. The air conditioner not only does it cool, but it actually removes the moisture out of the air. This is another reason why if you are outside on a hot, sticky day and you go into an air-conditioned climate, the temperature is not only cool, but it's crisp. When I say crisp, what is that? You're not dealing with this humidity. The temperatures or the humidity is much drier. But if you leave it up to the HVAC guys that use these talking points, they will tell you that the air conditioner doesn't actually cool. And if that were the case, just think about it this way. The air conditioner, if you remove the front grill off of your AC and you were to touch that cooling coil, I don't remember if it's called a condenser or evaporator. Like I said, this is not my line of work. But if you touch that cooling coil, what you're going to notice is that the temperature on that cooling coil is significantly colder than the ambient temperature in the room. This is another reason why if you look at that cooling coil, you're also going to see condensate, moisture building up on that cooling coil. Why? Because it's removing the humidity out of the air. This is another reason if you look on the outside of it, of a window hung unit or even the wall hung unit. You look on the outside of it, it blows out hot air, and you're going to see the condensate dripping out of the back of the AC unit. So when you have people that make these statements, once again, I just wish people would really stop saying this, because it's an ignorant statement. It makes no sense that an HVAC specialist would say something this ridiculous. But anyhow, I want people to pay attention to these words right here. Moving heat from one area to another. And pretty much if that's what you're relying on, and I'm going to tell you this much right now. I'm not a fan of these units, okay? I've seen some of them work, and I can tell you this much right now. They don't move heat from one area to another. They don't work the best during the coldest days. This is what I've seen. But when they do work, they're not moving heat from one area to another. If that was the case, it would be completely ineffective. If your goal is to have a temperature of between 68 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and your outside ambient temperature is 32 degrees, and the inside ambient temperature, let's say, is 65 degrees, and you want it warmer, where are you getting that extra 10, 15 degrees of heat to be able to exceed? You're not getting it from the outside. So if it's a matter of moving heat from one area to another, where are you getting that heat from if it does not actually produce its own heat? Like I said, these statements here, be careful with this. It's not generating new heat, but moving heat from one area to another. It lets me know that these people who are putting forth these statements don't know what they're talking about. They don't understand this application or these heat pumps. They know nothing about it. And they're telling you things that literally don't make sense. In the same way, you have politicians pushing these agendas to try to get you with one of these heat pumps and to remove your gas-fired or oil-fired boilers. You can rest assured you're going to have mechanics that don't know what the hell they're doing when it comes down to installing these goddamn things. And if you don't believe me, hell, steam and hot water systems have been around for over a century. And yet you still have people who don't understand the way these systems work. I mean, yet and still to this day, despite the fact that I put up videos giving people a breakdown on how to properly install a steam radiator on a one-pipe system, I will still find somebody making a YouTube video saying, hey, when you get your radiator brand new, what you do is you buy a 1-inch a 1-inch to 1/8-inch bushing, and you put that at the top of the radiator, and you put your air vent there, which is completely inaccurate, and it's really just, you're losing efficiency. Despite the fact that the radiator comes with an 8-inch tapping at the bottom of it, and all you got to do is just remove the plug out of there with a screw and slide in your air vent, and you're done. But like I said, despite the fact that these things were designed, even though you can get them brand new and they're not built with the same quality, they still respect the ingenuity of how the radiators were initially built. So they kept it in the same continuity, because they understood this. But yet you're still going to have people coming forth and telling you something that's completely inaccurate. So the point that I'm saying is, if you got people who are still working on steam heating systems and hot water systems that don't know what they're doing, you have a technology that is still relatively new when it comes down to these heat pumps. I would say this is probably no older than 10 years old, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less, a little bit, just give or take. But this is still a relatively new technology. And they're trying to tell you that, well, this is more efficient than your boiler. Well, okay, chances are it's probably 100% efficient. I don't care about how efficient it is. How much does it cost to actually run this thing? And how effective is it when it comes down to heating my home? Those are the two things that you really need to know. Because they can tell you, well, this thing is 100% efficient, but if it can't get the job done, is it really saving you money? If it can never heat your home, is it really an effective heating system? And they're trying to use these heat pumps to now make hot water heat exchange. So you can run a hot water system, which this shit just sounds absolutely fucking crazy. And I've looked at some videos on this. I've been trying to just educate myself on these things. And they have these hot water storage tanks with multiple compartments. And one is kind of like a booster tank or whatever the case is, or a cushion tank. Because the temperature fluctuates so much that they have to have a storage of hot water just in case the unit shuts down. You don't have a temperature fluctuation. So that can kind of just sustain the heat flow until the damn thing restores temperature again. Then they got flow regulating valves to sustain how fast the actual flow of water is going through these things so it can extract as much heat as possible. I mean, this just sounds like a bunch of expensive bullcrap and garbage that they're going to sell you that can break down at any given time, and your system doesn't function properly, and you might have a technician that goes there and can't find these problems. This sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. I mean, here we have a relatively simple technology when it comes down to, in this case, we're talking about a hot water system, which a gas-fired boiler will take care of that problem. A gas-fired boiler has a fast recovery rate. A gas-fired boiler has a high efficiency rate. Why? Because it was specifically designed for this application. Just like with a steam boiler. Steam or hot water, doesn't matter how cold it gets outside, guess what? That boiler is still going to reach pressure as long as you size everything out properly and have everything the way it needs. Even in an application where it is not properly insulated, these things will still heat the place up. A hot water boiler, guess what? No matter how cold it gets outside, that boiler is still going to reach maximum water temperature. Why? Because it was specifically designed for that application. This specializes in air conditioning. Heat pumps, really HVAC units, that's all it really is. They're just reversing the damn refrigerant from one end to another. Really is designed for cooling a place down, not for heating. These work better on hot temperatures because it can withstand that. When you start trying to produce heat, there's so many issues that go on with this. They talk about a defrosting system, because the problem is the heat exchangers on the outside of this, they'll freeze up on you. And when they freeze up and it becomes like a block of ice, they don't work properly. This is another reason why they lose temperature in the wintertime when it freezes. The colder it gets, the harder it is for it to sustain temperature. Now, if you have any moisture out there, all your cold air is being dumped out here. This is just going to collect and freeze that moisture right onto your vent. It sounds like a bad idea waiting to happen. Now, I do see more of this being put in certain places, but by and large, I still don't see that. I just don't. Most people they'll have this as an air conditioning system or even a backup system, but they'll still keep their heating system, their gas-fired or oil-fired boilers, which is what I would recommend. If you want to get this as a centralized air conditioning system, I'm all with it. If you want to get this to have it as a backup heating system in case something fails, the more options, the better. But why is it that your government is trying to minimize your options and get you into this one thing? Think about that. Just like when it comes down to the gas stove, they want to tell you how this is killing the environment. Now, we've been using these things for years, have had no problems with it. We'll cook directly within a few inches in front of these things. We're cooking and we don't have any problems with it. But somehow the dangers involved with that have leapfrogged, harming us directly, which we should be the first ones impacted by it. Why? Because we're using it. In certain cases, y'all have even used some of these things to heat your homes on rare occasions. But it somehow has leapfrogged harming us directly to harming the environment. Think about how none of this makes any sense. I want you to really think long and hard on the nonsense that they are pushing to you. And I'm going to tell you this again. The most reliable source of heat that you'll ever have will come from a boiler. The most reliable air conditioning that you'll ever have the most reliable source of cooling that you will have will come from an air conditioner. My advice, you should not be trying to use this thing to heat your home, unless it's a rare occasion or a situation where you really need to use it. And just to let you know, do I need to go into that example? Well, I'll say this much. Hotels, when you go into most hotels, the room that you rent for the night or however long you're staying there, most hotels do not have centralized systems. They have these HVAC units that produce heat and air conditioning. And every hotel that I've been in that has actually had this, the air conditioning is produced by Freon and you have a compressor. The heat is produced by an electrical heating element, the same way you would have in a space heater. So if you wanted to make heat with this thing, what it's going to do is it's going to cut off the air compressor and it's just going to run the electric heating element. Now, if this system is so effective by just having these reverse pumps, these split units, how come they're not using this in hotel rooms? Every single hotel as a matter of fact, I've gone to some hotels that still have steam heating systems in it. I have seen not one hotel that actually has this working the way these units are described to work. And that would be the first place that you should really see this application, because you figure it would be more effective. But they don't use it. They would rather use a heating element. Why is that? And I'm going to take one good guess at that here, probably because that heating element is more costly to use rather than reversing the refrigerant from one side to another. Or let me rephrase that, more cost effective to use than doing it this way. Because this should be the first place where you see these applications, and I don't. Now, maybe I just haven't been to enough hotels. Maybe I just haven't seen enough. But just from what I've seen, my eyes have not seen this setup in hotels. They still use a unit that they put inside of a wall unit, and they make the air conditioning through the compressor and the freon, and the heat comes from an electrical heating element. As a matter of fact, if they're so gun-ho on this, why don't they produce wall-hung and window-hung units that you can buy that simply does this? Why won't they do this? As a matter of fact, sometime back in 2005, 2006, I looked at an air conditioner that can do both heat and AC. And I was considering buying it. And the way it produced heat, I'm wondering, how does it actually make its heat? And the same way I just described, it has an electric heating element, like a space heater. That's how it makes its heat. So if you want heat, the air compressor the compressor cuts off, the fan still stays on, and the heating element actually runs, and that's how it makes heat. So it's no different than actually having a space heater making hot producing heat inside of your room. But we should have been seeing this a while ago, and we haven't. And that's the point that I'm overall trying to get at here. And now here they are trying to force this technology upon you. A technology that I'm pretty sure they haven't perfected yet. A technology that seems unnecessarily complicated and complex to do something that, a boiler can do with ease. And what I will say is this: they're going to sell you all of these things and tell you, well, this stuff is more efficient, it's this, that, and the other. All this really means is this. I want you to think of your favorite movie characters, whether it be a villain, whether it be a superhero. Typically, when you have them in their own setting, their own environment, their own movie, these characters do well. The characters are loved. They really get to showcase their talents and what they're capable of. When you start putting these characters in movies where you're mixing them up with other superheroes or other villains, guess what? The movie doesn't do as good as you would have thought it would have done. Freddy Krueger versus Jason Voorhees sounds good, but when they actually put it together in the movie wasn't as good as everyone thought it would be. Because why? You're now trying to hog the spotlight with two different, it doesn't come out good. What I'm saying is they do better in their own applications, in their own environment, in their own settings. As an example, there's many different heating systems that they're going to tell you about. I've been reading about some of these heating systems for years. I've read about geothermal heat, where they extract heat out of the ground and use it to warm up applications like private houses and whatnot. However, I've read about this since the mid-90s. I was still back in high school when I was reading about this. Out of all the buildings I've been into in New York City and in the New York State area, I have yet to see a single house use this heating system. You have to ask the question why. They talk about how efficient it is and how it saves so much money, but why don't I see it being used? This is the question that you would have to ask. Just like with the radiant heating system, I believe I've only seen maybe 2 applications where it has been used. As a matter of fact, a couple of years ago, I went into an apartment building in Manhattan. And what the super told me, that this is one of 2 buildings, or the only 2 buildings that actually have this system in operation. Now, if you've heard anything about radiant heat, people are going to tell you how wonderful it is. Oh, it's the most comfortable form of heat, which, I don't know. I will say this much. Heating up the floor, that is pretty comfortable. You don't have to worry about cold feet, but this doesn't do anything that I haven't seen a conventional heating system do, whether you use radiators or convectors. These things have the same effect, and they do the job much faster. So when people sit back and say that this is the most comfortable form of heat, once again, I don't know. But when I asked the superintendent, tell me about this heating system. How does it work? Does it work effectively? What he told me, and this was a big building, stated that this system has a lot of problems. Now, this is an older system. It ran on black pipe. All right. The way these systems are done now, they run with PEX piping, and you use very low water temperatures. But with this particular system, he was saying that there was temperature fluctuation. Tenants would complain that they're not being heat. It's not warm enough for them. I mean, these are things that were taking place when it comes down to these systems. These systems work best in their own applications that were specifically designed to cater for these particular systems, meaning you have the highest insulation value in these homes. Little to very, let me rephrase this, very little heat loss, because you're always going to have some heat loss. This is just a fact of life. So you have very little heat loss. So it doesn't have to worry about high recovery. You have brand new windows. All of this stuff, insulation inside of the walls. Yeah, these heating systems can work very effective under those applications. And yeah, under those circumstances, they'll be more efficient. They might even save you more money in those particular situations. In the comparison that what they'll make, they'll say that this stuff saves you more money than your conventional gas-fired boiler would. But you're not using the gas-fired boiler in the same application where you have a high insulation value. You're comparing it to buildings that have older insulation, or some of them that are not even insulated properly, and you're comparing apples to oranges. So what I'm trying to showcase to you is how they will omit information, how they will make false comparisons in order to fabricate the results they want. This is another reason why I don't even bother with statistics anymore. I used to use that talking point years ago on this channel. I don't do it no more because I realize you're fabricating numbers. You're engineering results to what you want it to be, even though this is not a fair comparison. And when somebody actually does a fair comparison, the information doesn't add up to what you're trying to showcase. And I'm going to show you something else furthermore in this production in a little while. So once again, when it comes down to these heating systems, yeah, they're very effective when you have 90% insulation or better. But here's the problem. Homes start to deteriorate. Things break down. Insulation starts to lose its value. This is just what happens. So what happens in a situation if your insulation, you have to rip open walls, or you had people, you had 2 or 3 different people living in this home at one point, and everybody decided to do something different. I don't want that wall there. Rip it down. Take out the insulation, whatever. Now here you come into a situation where you realize, wait a second, this thing doesn't seem to be working effective. Why? Because they want to run it at low temperatures. And on top of that, well, the low temperatures are only effective if you have a high insulation value. Now, conventional cast iron radiators or cast iron convectors, or even steel convectors, hell, as much as I am not a fan of baseboard, but even baseboard heating, these are systems that can work in areas that have heavy drafts, in areas that have poor insulation, and they can still keep the place warm. So even during the harshest conditions and environments where insulation might not be the best, this stuff can still keep you warm versus this heat pump stuff. There's no guarantee whether it's going to be able to work. The colder it gets outside, guess what? That's harder for it to work. And if you have high heat loss inside, guess what? That's going to make it even harder for it to get the job done. You got to worry about the outside of it freezing up on you, which you hope that does. You hope all the systems do what it's supposed to do to keep it defrosted. But if that fails, guess what? Now you have an issue where this thing is frozen up on you and can't work properly, can't work effective. This is literally what you're dealing with. It doesn't seem like it's worth it. Just like when it comes down to the radiant heating systems. Yes, if people say that they're the most comfortable heating systems that they've ever had, and they run at low temperatures, yes, I will agree with that. I would say that they run at low temperatures. As far as which is the most comfortable, I would say that would have to be a climate control system, but will it be most cost effective? I don't necessarily think so. But just to get back to what I was saying, they say that these systems run at low temperatures. Yes, 120 degrees of hot water, 125 degrees of hot water circulating through plastic PEX piping underneath the floor is very efficient. But how effective is it at heating up a place when it's 0 degrees outside, wind chills blowing crazy, and your insulation might not be the best? In a new application, yes, this will work very well. If you try to put these in pre-existing applications, this is another reason why you don't see them in pre-existing applications, because they're not the most effective. But if you leave it up to the engineers who do this, they're going to tell you it's the best heating system that you'll ever have. And I have to respectfully disagree. It is a good heating system. I don't think it is the best. The best heating systems in my mind can get the job done during the worst conditions, even if the conditions are not ideal. And I'm talking about poor insulation. a heating system that can get the job done during those conditions are the best systems in my opinion. But they'll tell you how they burn more fuel. No, they have to work harder because the insulation is bad. Now, you put these very same systems in an area that has good insulation, the systems won't even run that long. They won't even run as hard because it doesn't have to. So what savings are we really talking about? There's a lot of stuff that's being omitted here. Now, once again, you can decide whether you want to go along with this heating system or not. It's up to you. I'm not here to talk you into doing so or not. But what I will say is do not remove your gas-fired boiler. You still need to keep that, because I'm listening to some videos here on YouTube, but this is what I'm noticing. I've seen maybe 2 or 3 videos on YouTube where people are saying they're not proud of these systems, they don't like them, they're not the most effective, that they went ahead and put these heat pumps in and they don't like them. But the majority of the videos that I'm seeing thus far are in favor of these heating systems. And I'm just curious to know, I start to question that. So I'm going to say, when you look on YouTube, it has a higher favorability rate of people talking positively about these heating systems, which I'm wondering whether they're being paid to speak like this about these heating systems. But then again, when you go ahead and you look at the actual results, and I looked up some reviews, and as a matter of fact, let me go ahead and just showcase that to you. These are Google results that I looked up, and the unit that I was mainly referred to is the LG air handler unit, or the the heat pump. Let me turn the engine on the car for a second. This thing does not seem to want to come on when I first step on the pedal. All right, let me try this again. All right. Take a look at the reviews. All right. Because I wanted to know, I said, okay, this is whenever they try to push an agenda and try to stuff it down people's throats, they'll start pushing forth propaganda. They'll start flooding the information zone with everything that's positive about it. They'll have people go out here and just speak highly of these systems and tell people how wonderful the stuff is and how well it works. Let me just let you know something when it comes down to electric heat compared to heat using gas or oil. There's a reason why to this day energy is still produced by gas and oil. Heat is still produced by gas and oil because it is the most cost-effective and cost-efficient means to produce massive amounts of heat. Boilers have been used in every single application, whether it be a small private house or a large, massive commercial monstrosity that you'll see sitting in the middle of Manhattan somewhere. They have been used in every application, and they still are the most recommended to be used in these applications. Why? Because it's the most effective. Now, you can use different systems, but they're not the most effective, and you have to use them with proper discernment before you decide to go ahead and make this your primary source of heat. Now, the Biden administration is trying to push all of this stuff onto you with these heat pumps. He wants to put $169 million into getting people to remove their gasoline powered appliances and using these heat pumps. But I decided to go ahead and take a look at the reviews. Like I said, on YouTube, I wasn't getting a whole lot of accurate information. And here's what I was seeing. This is Tampa Bay, Florida, August 28, 2023. And they're talking about the company LG. That's 1 star. Let's click onto this. Y'all can pause it and read through it if you'd like to. I'm just going to scroll through slowly. And so far, there are 3 pages that I've seen of these reviews. Andrea from New York. Okay, so maybe you don't need heat too much in Florida. But New York, you definitely do need heat. But you only got 2 stars. 2 stars. Once again, you can read it. This is LG. Now, you remember I told you that with hot water and steam heating systems, these systems have been around for over a century, and yet and still, you still have people that don't necessarily know how to work with these systems. Now you have a technology that's roughly around 10 years old that's being used, and now they're trying to push it in your face. And if people haven't figured out a way to master stuff that's been around for over a century, here you have something that's been around for a little bit over a decade or less. What do you think is going to happen? And what you're hearing about is bad customer service, issues with the units, just all types of problems. I mean, 1-star reviews. I mean, this is poor. This is bad. And this is particularly on the LG unit. 1 star. These are reviews. This is done back in January this year, 2023. So this is not even a year old. These reviews are under a year. And it only continues to get like this. I mean, I could scroll through this. If y'all want to read through the entire thing, y'all can do it. I'm not going to sit here and read through all this. Once again, these are the same units that they're talking about, these heat pumps. Brianna, 1 star. August 11th, last year, 2022. So once again, look at what they do. They're trying to force this on you. But look at the reviews. Why are the reviews so bad? And it only continues to get worse. 1 star. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Boy. And like I said, I've gone through 3 pages of this. This only has 3 pages of reviews. 1 star. The majority of them are 1-star reviews. People aren't happy with these units. They aren't happy with the service that they're getting. Let's just look at does it say a location? Silt CO. I'm not sure where that's at. Look at the reviews. Somebody in Texas. Look at the reviews, 1-star reviews. So once again, they're trying to push this stuff on you. And if you're gullible enough to fall for it, once you go ahead and you buy into this, the fix is in. Now they've removed your gas boiler. They've removed your entire system. That's probably what they're going to offer to do. Hey, we'll install this for you for free. And that's how they get you. And I'm going to give you one more story before I go. And as a matter of fact, let me shut the engine off and I'll just I'll scroll through the reviews. And like I said, y'all can pause it as y'all go along. I used to be a superintendent. And for a number of years, we burned number 6 oil. I had 2 big residential apartment buildings. In 2012, they decided to go from burning number 6 oil to going through with a gas conversion. Now, the 2 companies that deal with natural gas and power distribution in New York City that I can think off the top of my head is Con Edison and National Grid. National Grid, I believe, deals with Queens and the Brooklyn area. Con Edison deals with the Bronx and Manhattan, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure about Staten Island. Once again, look at the reviews. 1 review. Pennsylvania, gets cold over there. You know, these are recent reviews, 2020. But as I was saying, in order to go through this gas conversion, which was going to be done through Con Edison, you pretty much had to have you don't have the proper gas line to supply the gas capacity to heat the building. So what Con Edison was offering is, hey, listen, if you go Con Edison firm or gas firm, meaning that you use us only as your fuel provider for when it comes down to heat, we will charge you a cheaper rate than what you're paying for oil, and we will run the gas line to your building from the street for free. That will be included in the package. But we want you to go to gas firm, meaning that you don't use anything else. Look at the reviews here. I guess at some point LG decided to start trying to respond to these reviews because it's looking terrible on their end. I mean, this is terrible. Anyhow, let me digress from that. So long story short, we had the gas installed. Sometime in 2013, we had both buildings were running on natural gas. But what Con Edison also wanted was, in order to keep these rates low and locked in, you had to disassemble your fuel tank, your oil tank. Disconnect it, drain it, and sabotage it. Put holes in it, so that way you can't even use it even if you wanted to. That way you're stuck with us. See, that's what you call a monopoly. And in a situation like that, which we never felt for, we said, no, we're not doing that. One of these tanks we just had built wasn't even 5 years old. And they're telling us, yeah, sabotage your fuel tank. We spent thousands of goddamn dollars to put this tank in. And you're going to tell us, hey, just put holes in it, destroy it, disconnect it, so that way you're with Con Edison firm. No. You see, it sounds good that they're going to tell you, oh, the price is going to be so cheap and it's going to be so efficient at first. And what happens is once the fix is in, that's when they can raise the prices up any way they want. Because why? You don't have another option. Because in order for you to go ahead and build another tank or to fix that tank and repipe the damn thing in, guess what? It's going to cost you so much money that it's not even going to be worth it. See, when they're telling you things like this, you got to be careful. And I guarantee you, when it comes down to these HVAC units, these heat pumps, that's one 5-star review. And there's only a handful of them that you can count on this review. Anyhow, let me get back to what I was saying. When you go along with these heat pumps on these HVAC units, they're going to give you all kinds of incentives to go ahead and install this. But I guarantee you what's going to come behind it. They might even say, hey, we'll put this in for free. Have you ever seen some of these sealed commercials where they literally try to go in and demonize your traditional heating system? And they'll talk about, well, you have a furnace and an air conditioner, and they've been running good, but lately they're getting old and tired and cranky and need to be replaced with this new sealed system. You see how they go about doing this? And before they know it, they're showcasing how they're doing all of this nonsense, ripping out your stuff. And what they mention in this commercial is that, hey, we can do it for free. You could get these abatements or these incentives, and we'll put this in for free. But I guarantee you what comes with that incentive is to remove your current existing heating system. Probably to the point where they'll remove all of your pipes, remove your boiler, and they'll slap in these units. And guess what? At that point in time, when you're dissatisfied, you're going to say, well, maybe I should have just kept what I previously had, but you won't be able to go back to that. Ultimately, let me just say this much. This is all a matter of control. With gas, with a gas-fired boiler, it gives you just a bit more independence. Just like with the gasoline internal combustion engine cars, it gives you a bit more independence. They don't want you to have this. They want you to be fully dependent on some electric grid that they can control. And I'll just give you something else to think about before I go. For those of you who think that this electric stuff is really the way to go, every summer, you hear them putting out heat advisories. They tell you on the hottest days, please be considerate with electricity because you don't want to cause a shortage. You don't want to cause a power outage. And what would cause the power outages? You using up too many air conditioners. All these buildings and houses using air conditioners all at the same time is really putting a strain on the electrical grid. So be conservative and be considerate on how you use this. If you don't need it on, turn it off. Get you this energy efficient air conditioner or whatever the case is, which I don't have a problem with an energy efficient air conditioner. Everyone should have one. But they're telling you this because literally, Gail from Ridgewood, New York, I think that's in Queens somewhere. This is comical. But the point that I'm making is, if electricity is the source that we need to use when it comes down to everything, heating our homes, powering our vehicles, doing everything in our day-to-day lives. Jane, I'm saying it right, Jane from New York. These are piss poor reviews. I mean, I can go on and on with this. I think I'm going to leave it right there. But if what they're saying is so spot on, then the question would have to remain, why is it that in the summertime you have these power outages? The more people use their air conditioners. You hear of this every summertime, especially during the hot seasons or during the hot months. When was the last time in the winter have you heard city advisors sending text messages about be considerate about the amount of heat that you use because you could cause a power outage? When was the last time you heard that on the coldest days of the winter? You don't hear this. Why? Because running your boiler does not put a strain on the electrical grid. Because as I've told you before, it is the most effective and cost-effective way to run your heat. This is why you will find boilers in small, single-family homes, and you'll even find them in skyscraper buildings, because it is the most effective way to produce heat for your home. These are facts. And you have a bunch of, I guess you could say, elected or unelected officials, depending on what you think took place. I'm not going to get into that. who know nothing about heating systems, who know nothing about a day's work of hard labor. They know nothing about nothing, but they're sitting here trying to tell you how you need to heat and cool your home and what source of energy you need to use when it comes down to how you commute and how you literally can wash yourself and cook your foods. And if they're successful at this, I'm going to tell you ultimately what this really means, because the agendas that they are pushing are not sustainable. What it really means is that the same way how you live in a house, a multifamily home or building, and a landlord supplies you with the heat, that won't be the case anymore. You're going to be paying directly out of pocket. So for those of you who think that, well, this is really going to save me all kinds of money and I can't wait for them to put these heat pumps into my building, guess what? This means you can control it whenever you want to, but guess what? If you can't afford it, you're going to be sitting inside of a cold apartment. That's all that means. Because in many cases, you're not going to be able to afford to heat this 3-bedroom apartment. I mean, hell, the cost of rent and living is going through the damn roof. Imagine that for those of you who live in an apartment building, and now you have to factor in paying for your own heat out of pocket. Oh, this is great for landlords, but it'll be a disaster for you. Now, once again, I'll say this much. As far as these systems are concerned, I'm not a fan of it. I would never install it in any home that I live in. But if you want to go ahead and use it as a secondary system, if you want to use it as your main source of cooling in the summertime, I have no problem with that. Why? Because they're best suited for that. But if you are trying to use these systems to make your domestic hot water in your heat purposes, I highly recommend that if you are going to do so, that you do not remove your gas-fired or oil-fired boilers. Even if the boiler is old and outdated, buy a new boiler. But do not have them come and rip out your pre-existing system, because once they do that, the fix is in. As I've told you, the way they work and the way these governments can pull the bullshit that they're pulling, if they can get the majority of people on board with their agenda, that's when the fix is in. If they can't get enough people on board with the agenda, this will never work. All of this nonsense by 2030, this clean energy nonsense, it makes no sense. Because you're still producing emissions, because you have to generate the electricity from somewhere. You don't have enough solar panels. The solar panels are not a reliable source of energy. This is why it's not used in such large number. You don't have enough windmills and not a reliable source of energy. This is why they don't use them in record numbers. The most reliable source of energy is done through internal combustion. Two of the greatest inventions that man has ever made is number one, the steam boiler, and number two, the internal combustion engine. These are grandfathered in technologies that have always been reliable, that have proven their worth over the years, and they will always be the most reliable source of energy. And you start trying to veer away from that, that's when you start having other problems. Now, with that being stated, that's all I got to say in this production. You can feel free to like, share the production. If you haven't subscribed, you can subscribe if you would like to, and if you feel that you've gained anything tangible out of this particular production, you can feel free to leave a donation via the links in the description box. And with that being stated, that's all I got to say in this production. And I'll catch you on a later date.